quite implied
But
to be
yeah,
a majority
but when
Jewish
you just say
state.
positive feelings towards Israel, this is such a vacuous poll question. Just hating most of a group doesn't mean you hate the group. So you are basically writing off all Jews with that statement, essentially.
Is it also safe to say that 65% of British Jews are making things themselves unsafe by identifying as Zionists?
Fundamentally anti-Zionist, even if you don't believe in the immediate destruction of the state of Israel, you would fundamentally be anti-Zionist. So calling that a Zionist position, that you believe that there is a temporary need to not have these populations mixed, but fundamentally you're against an ethnic state, to call that a Zionist position is ridiculous to me. Who do you think is worse, Hasan or Nick Fuentes? Side thought here. I feel like the thing people want more than anything right now is people to hit back. Hey.
Hello, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good.
Are you like on the other end of your room?
Yeah, I was just grabbing a drink. Sorry.
Wow, empty chairing me. What the? Jesus.
Okay, so there was. Well, I just want to pull up the tweets because I remember I sent you a screenshot when I was first messaging you to talk. Okay. So the other day I messaged you. I sent you some screenshots of some tweets at the pub. It's seething about politics on my phone. And I saw you say, the slightest sympathy for Israel is not the same as supporting the complete ethnic cleansing of Palestine. But I'll put that aside, so I assume someone's being disingenuous with you beforehand. You say, yes, if you follow the logic above, you'd have to admit that you believe the majority of Jews on Earth are as good as neo-Nazis. No. This person says, if the majority of Jews favored killing and displacing all the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, and I said that is a fascist position, you're saying that would make me anti-Semitic. Just clarifying. And you said, might have to think more about it, but you probably would be. If the majority of Jews seriously wanted to kill and displace 5 million people, it would be justified to think there's something wrong with them. Unless you think you can hate most Jews without being a Jew hater, lol. So,
Yep.
I feel like saying that if a majority of a group believes something, and you believe, in your opinion is, that belief is like abhorrent, you know, despicable, beyond the pale, Nazi adjacent or Nazi leaning, whatever you want to call it. If you believe that about that position, then you are, in some essence, bigoted against that group that hold that position.
Okay.
Is that what your position is?
So I can probably fast forward like 2 or 3 steps to this conversation if you want. So if the majority of Jews actually wanted to just kill like 5 million Arabs, would that make them, would it make you anti-Semitic to not like that, to think like you've got a really big issue with most Jews? Like you think most Jews are basically on the same level as Nazis? And then I would say, well, your behavior might be kind of like indistinguishable from that of someone who's bigoted against Jews, because you'd be discriminating against them. You would probably be like red flagging every other Jew that you see. Because it's a majority of them. You'd also be having to wonder, why is the majority of this particular ethno-religious group like wanting to just murder 5 million people? That's kind of crazy. Then the counter to that would be, well, you're not really hating them for their immutable characteristics. You're hating them for something that is just a political opinion that they hold, but they don't necessarily have to hold. And then I would respond to that by saying, that's probably fair. It's not the same as hating them because of an immutable characteristic. But then it circles back to the actual conversation, which is, if a slight sympathy for Israel makes you a neo-Nazi, then the question would be that if the majority of Jews have a slight sympathy for Israel, which I think they do, I think it's quite clear, then is it anti-Semitic to call that neo-Nazism? And I would say that that is, because there is something about the general experience.
Okay,
of most
just
Jews
when
that
you
would make
okay,
them
okay, just
lean
I
towards
don't
Zionism.
have the rest of this exchange in front of me right now, so just trying to get
Okay.
some context on the rest of what you're saying here. Is roughly the conversation happening here? Is it about that polling where that is used to say basically 90% of Jews are Zionists?
It's not 90, it's like 70 something.
Or whether I hear it
yeah,
get quoted as 90 by like a bunch of people, but yeah, basically there's this polling that says that most Jews, doesn't say most Jews are Zionist. It says like it's about positive feelings towards Israel or something, and people take that to mean most Jews are Zionists, right?
Depends on which poll you look for, because like for American polls, there are polls that will just say like most Jews believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, so that would be Zionist.
Sure,
I think in the
but
UK, it's
then
like
then then
70% say they're Zionists.
so
Yeah.
what definition of Zionism do you use? I
That
thought
Israel has a yeah, go on.
I thought so. Your position is Zionism is just Israel has a right to exist, not that there has to be an expansionist element to Zionism.
No, it's Zionism is Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. You can be a Zionist who opposes the settlements in the West Bank. You can be a Zionist who supports them. Yeah.
So you don't think that Zionism? Okay, so if you believe, let's say this, would you say this is a Zionist position that, in theory, it should be a one state, one person, one vote, but that's not possible right now? Is that considered a Zionist position to you?
That's very difficult because
But I feel like that's where like most people land. Most even like not most, I wouldn't say, but a lot of Western Jews are going to land in that position where they understand the legitimate security fears that Israel has in the current situation, but don't believe in an ethno state. And so what I feel like there's a game being played by almost both sides in different directions, where everyone's trying to conflate Jew with Zionist, and the basis that's being used, sort of, it feels like from you guys' direction, is well, most Jews have a positive sentiment towards Israel. So if you say that thinking Israel should be an ethno state is a Nazi position, then you hate Jews. It feels like is what's basically going on.
Well, where's this? Are you suggesting there's a majority of Western Jews who believe in a one person, one vote, one state solution?
No, I'm not suggesting. I don't know whether there's a majority. I'm saying a lot of people, I think, land on that position. A lot of those people who say, I have a positive feeling towards Israel, probably don't principally believe in the idea of ethno states. Especially not more secular liberal Jews, I'm imagining.
Maybe I think my understanding of like most Western Jews as well is like when they say Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, that the Jewish state implies that it's majority Jewish. Yeah, or at least Israel's
so what polling is there? So what's the polling? How many Jews agree with the idea that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state? What's the polling on that?
I can find my little thread on it.
Because the one I always see cited is the one where it's just positive feelings towards Israel, and people use that to completely astroturf and act like every Jew is a Zionist.
Okay. This might take me a minute to find it because it's on a Twitter thread, so I don't know how to search my own fucking tweets. Was it French Jews I was talking about?
So with this
Jews,
Petri Club person, that helps.
Who's that?
I'm saying what the @ you're replying to in the screenshot is.
Oh no, it's not that. This isn't this is a really old thread that I
okay.
did about this. Was it a year ago I did this? What's this? So it was around April 2024. Okay, it's gonna take me fucking ages. Maybe find the recent Pew one on Israel. That might be a start for America. Pew Research. American Jews. Israel. Okay, so this is Pew in April 2024. There are probably some inferences we can make here, but if you disagree with any of them, you can. I'll maybe send this to you. This is mostly about the war, but I think even if you look at where they're leaning just in terms of the war, I think it's probably safe to infer that most of these people are not going to be like one-stayers. So when it comes to even just like sympathy for the Israeli government, you get like 54% with a favorable view of this government, like which is probably one of the most right-wing governments or the most right-wing government Israel's ever had.
So I mean, yeah. So I'm just saying, even under this, it's like, yeah, I'll agree. I totally agree that like a significant, probably at least half of Jews would be considered Zionists under the definition we're using right now. If you're assuming that, you know, what does it say? 62% of Jewish adults in the US see the way Israel is carrying out its response to Hamas as acceptable. If you're polling acceptable, in April. Oh, this is April 2024. Oh,
Just about a
that's
year
a little,
ago.
yeah, that's a little bit different. I don't know. I don't know if I draw such a strong inference on that. I thought this was like super recent. I don't know. I feel like there's plenty of people who could have seen it as acceptable in April 2024 who aren't principally ethno-state supporters.
When you say ethno-state though, like that's the thing I don't get is because if we're talking about most Jews in America or even in France, Britain, etc., saying that they have favorable views towards the state of Israel and that they feel like it's an important part of their Jewish identity, like Israel implies Jewish state. Like that's very implied. It's going to be a Jewish majority state because the only Israel that's not a Jewish majority state is one that somehow has been fucking couped by a minority, or it's one that's dissolved itself and turned into a single one state with Palestine. So I think I think Israel is kind of quite implied to be a majority
but when
Jewish
you just
state.
say positive feelings towards Israel, this is such a vacuous poll question. That's not saying. Yeah, there's so many different things that are connected to that where someone's got family members that are from Israel, or they've been to Israel at some point in their life, or they've they see Israel as like, I don't like what they do. I wish it could be one person, one vote, but I see Israel as like, I like the fact that the Jews have the ability to go to a state that isn't in the West, where we've been fucking holocausted before. There's lots of reasons that people can have positive feelings towards Israel that don't necessarily mean I think this country should be an ethno-state into perpetuity, right? I think if the idea of believing in ethno-states, fundamentally, this is a fascist belief, right?
What believing in an ethnic majority?
Believing in an
Historically persecuted minority is a fascist belief.
Enforced ethnic majority, enforced ethnic lines to maintain the presence of an ethnicity and supremacy of an ethnicity in an area. That's like a fascist.
Okay, so I'll cut out a few of those words because it really just means to preserve an ethnic majority, right? That's what it actually means. Not like
but that maintains the ethnic supremacy. Like if you've got anytime where you're going to be any rules that you craft to maintain ethnic majority there are going to have a knock-on of ethnic supremacy. No.
If you mean supremacy in the sense that like you probably like the main ethnic group would have like more economic advantages and things like that, but when people say supremacy, I feel like they're always invoking things like fucking Jim Crow and shit like that.
Okay, well, I'm not invoking that. I'm not like a retard lefty, so I'm not invoking that. I'm using very clinical supremacy that is in one ethnicity will be raised up above the others in that society.
So the question is, what about if it's like inherently fascistic to want to maintain an ethnic majority in a particular area, right?
Yeah, to enforce that. Yeah.
Okay. Does it matter why they want it?
Yeah, I think it does to some extent. That's why I say I understand. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call someone fascist for this position, right? Where someone says, I don't believe that it's possible to have a one state, one vote situation right now. I think that will be a horrible safety situation for both people, for both peoples. So I don't think that's possible right now. But in theory, I principally believe in one state, one person, one vote, right? That would be totally reasonable. That's like, yeah, you can't have these people living together right now, but there's no principal commitment to the maintenance of an ethnic majority.
Yeah, that's my position as well. Like, it shouldn't be for its own sake.
Sure. But like, let's say, so if most Jews believed, no, we just want this to be for the Jews, and you said, okay, that's fascist. Even if most Jews believe that, would that make you anti-Semitic if you took that position towards them?
If someone said that they wanted Israel to remain like a Jewish majority state, like has a right to exist as a Jewish majority state, and I said that's fascist, then I would say that that's like, I don't know, it's not inherently anti-Semitic. I guess it depends on like how much you've kind of ignored to why you say it. But yeah, I think there is to some degree to have that like anti-Zionist position of this idea that like it's like you can only want a Jewish majority state in that region because you're a fascist. If that's your only explanation for it, then yeah, that probably would be anti-Semitic.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
Because you have to deny a lot of Jewish history to believe that. Yeah.
So you're saying that, so let's say someone in England says, I think England should be English majority and we should make sure it's always English majority. And I don't mean English like, civic English. I mean English like ethnic English. We should always be English. Would you? And I call them a fascist. Would I be Anglophobic?
No.
Okay. Well, why are the rules different for the Jews versus the whites?
Because the Jews have had different rules for as long as they've existed. They've always been treated.
Well, I know.
Differently.
I think
They've always been
a lot of people are
persecuted.
sick of
They've
that.
always been treated. Yeah. What?
I think a lot of people are sick of the rules being different for Jews. I was joking. I'm just pissing around.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, but that's the thing is like people complain about whatever they call like Jewish exceptionalism, whatever. It's like, yeah, motherfucker. If a group is treated exceptionally, like by the entire world,
I do
Muslim,
think. No, I do
Christian,
think this is like retarded thinking. I think this sort of thinking does just fuel anti-Semitism more than anything.
Yeah, because wait, what argument?
The argument you're making right now. You're making like you're saying, well, Jews have been treated different, so they get special rules now. Sorry, guys, we're letting the Jews do extra now. You guys don't get to do it, but the Jews
what
do.
special rules though? What?
But you're saying that ethno-states are fine when they're for Jews, basically, right? That's the point.
You realize I would say the same for Palestinians as well, right? Like if Palestinians got a state, I would be very fucking skeptical of someone who was saying that, yeah, they should just have open borders and allow any like migration group to come in and like out and write out their majority as well. Like a Palestinian state, why is it called a Palestinian state? Because it'd be majority Palestinian Arabs.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Is that fascist?
Well, no, but the point is that you have a principled commitment to the maintenance of the ethnicity, right? Assumedly, the idea of starting a Palestinian state isn't this place is going to be into perpetuity, majority Palestinian, enshrined in law, majority Palestinian. It's for the Palestinians forever. This is now their homeland that no one else that you can't immigrate to if you're going to fuck up the ethnic makeup. You can't that's not the idea that I think anyone's saying when they say they want a Palestinian state. I think they're saying that the people there right now should have the ability to start a sovereign nation, to have a sovereign nation that is recognized under international law. It's not saying they should get an ethno-state forever.
Okay, we're not talking about forever. Okay, let's say.
Well, we're not talking about. Okay, so maybe I've missed a point that I meant to make here. I'm sort of trying to shave off I think there's safety concerns right now, so I don't think there should be one nation, one person, one vote. Right? I'm shaving off that position, and the person we're talking about who is advocating for an ethno-state believes in an ethno-state for that people. Okay, not just for some limited time safety issue, but as a principle, they believe in the ethno-state.
Well, yeah, having it for its own sake when there's literally no other reason. If you live in a world where that level of discrimination and fear and persecution doesn't exist, then yeah, of course it doesn't make sense. That's why it doesn't make sense for the English. But obviously for the Jews, especially in the Middle East, that we're not in that world. We're not going to be in that world for probably most of our lifetimes.
So it is under your perspective, totally fine if someone says, I'm a Jew. I believe in the right for Jews to have their homeland in Israel. I think Israel should be for the Jews, majority Jews. And no, that's not because I'm worried about safety right now. I am worried about safety right now, but also I just think it should be for the Jews forever. You would say, and then obviously would that be fine?
Yeah, that's fine to call them fascists for that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, because I think that's where a lot of people are coming at this from. I feel like that there's something that's happening is, I said essentially the same thing to you before, is people here say Hasan or someone talk about something like this, and then they get the response from the more lib side, and the more lib side is skipping 50 steps where it's like, well, I've spoken to lefties before, they actually think that it's fascist just to think that Israel should be allowed to maintain its borders for now and maintain the majority right now. They think that's fascist. So I'm assuming that when someone says it's fascist for Jews to want an ethno-state, what they actually mean is a tool and not the idea that a principled ethno-state should be maintained into perpetuity as a homeland for the Jews. So it's like there's like 20 steps between the points where we're at, where basically in your head you've already narrowed down this statement about, or like you've excluded other motivations for this statement, that I think a lot of people actually do hold. That is their actual motivation for calling these things fascist. They do see.
Yeah, no, so I do consider a lot of different motivations. That's why that's why I don't say, oh, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because there are a million reasons you can be anti-Zionist that aren't anti-Semitic. That's the reason when it comes to someone like Hasan, I held off on, I used to fight people on my own server who called him anti-Semitic because I just didn't buy that conclusion. The more I watch of him and the more I see just how flagrantly he denies anti-Semitism and at least concerns about demographics that actually are very valid right now for Jews in the Middle East, and the amount of denial that he does on Jewish history and like how like Middle Eastern Jews ended up in Israel, then from after hearing like where he's coming from with that and like that whole crowd, like because this crowd is not saying keep your ethnic majority now until it's safe to get rid of it. They want Israel destroyed like fucking yesterday. So
well, yeah, I understand
that's
that,
why
but,
I think
but
it's
then
anti-Semitic. Yeah.
okay. So you think it's anti-Semitic to believe one person, one vote now?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So you think that is an anti-Semitic belief, not just anti-Semitic in practice, but anti-Semitic in motivation.
I don't think it has to be in motivation. Mostly people have no fucking idea.
But you think because that would lead to the death of Jews in Israel, that's anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Um,
It would be like here's the counter. Is like let's say that Israel succeeds in their big project of like they want every Jew to return to the homeland, right? So it's like you've actually got like 16 million fucking Jews living from the river to the sea, and then they say, okay, well since now we're basically like 2/3 or 3/4 of the population, even with the West Bank and Gaza, and they say, all right, now we'll do one state solution. Let's go one person, one vote. Okay, because it's 25% Palestinian. What are they going to do anyway? Israel already kind of has that. And then Palestinians say, wait, fuck off. Like, we don't want to just have like be brought into this democracy with the country that has treated us like shit for the last 75 years, just so that we can exist as a minority and not like live the way that we want to in our own different society. And they would actually rather have a two-state. I would not call them fascist for wanting that. I think they'd be very within their rights to oppose that. Do you?
Yeah, no. So obviously, fascist. The part that I'm saying is fascist is the maintenance of the ethnic majority. But I think ultimately that there's some calculation you have to do with the creation of the actual creation of a nation, where it's like there's some balance between the sovereignty of the people that are there, the international law that already exists, but and like some moral consideration about like whether this should be recognized. And yeah, if there's like a huge population in a landmass that have a radically different way of wanting to live their life to the other people, then yeah, you would probably want them to have their own sovereignty to be able to distinguish themselves and not, kill each other basically. I totally agree with that, and I agree with the idea of, so you don't have to convince me on like Israel probably needs to exist right now. You don't need to convince me on that. I'm not like against that or calling that fascist. My issue is calling the people who think it should be one nation, one vote, person, one vote, calling those people fascist. The people that think it should be like that right now, calling those people anti-Semitic rather. I don't think that's necessarily anti-Semitic. I don't think usually we would look at, say, the outcomes for a country that is sort of representative of the people and say that if you have a policy position that would be bad for that country but isn't motivated by wanting bad on that country, you are then somehow bigoted against the people that are represented by that country. I don't see. Okay. We don't usually do that. I don't think that's a way we look at bigotry normally.
Yeah, which is why, like, even though so let's say I have someone come over and they say they want the one person, one vote thing, I'm probably not going to call them anti-Semitic. I'm probably not even going to tell them I think this would lead to anti-Semitic outcomes, even though I do. I'd probably just engage with them on why they think that and if they've considered this or that or this or that. Yeah, that's generally why with the anti-Semitic thing, I have a quite high threshold for throwing that accusation out.
Sure, so. But it seemed like you were saying that position is anti-Semitic, one person, one vote.
If you want it to happen right now, it would yield anti-Semitic outcomes. Yeah,
sure, but I wouldn't say that.
So it's kind of like does make it.
I wouldn't. We wouldn't say. I don't think we would say it for pretty much anything else, right? if someone said, like, what's a good example here? If someone in the UK said, "Oh, I think we should get rid of all the speech restrictions in the UK," you wouldn't then turn around to them and go, "Oh, so you're racist then," because that would lead to racist outcomes.
No, but I don't think that's quite the same because, well, first of all, with the speech restrictions, it's not quite as clear as just saying like, because one is like literally like abolishing a country. So
yeah, but I don't.
I don't think that's quite like a good analogy.
Okay,
but I'm trying to think of a better one.
Yeah, I mean, where's the disanalogous? But I just don't see that we would ever usually do this. The idea that, oh, you have a belief that things in this era or in this way should be fair among all people, that actually means you're a bigot.
Yeah, that's why I told you I don't think when people say they want a one-state solution with voting rights, I might think that it's like anti-Semitic as a position, but I don't think that the person saying it.
Change my language here slightly. Then that we wouldn't say that's a bigoted position. We wouldn't say, oh, you want things to be fair among all people in this area. That's a bigoted position.
But when they say they want it now, right? That's when they say they want to go right now into one person, one vote.
Yeah, I wouldn't usually say that's a bigoted position, even if there's some potential negative outcome. I wouldn't state that's a bigoted position.
Do you think it would currently have like would you say that it would have bigoted outcomes?
Bigoted outcomes? I mean, there would be like hate crimes and stuff like that, but I don't know what's bigoted outcomes mean. There would be more ethnic and religious violence as a result of that, probably. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I think that's
Bonecox.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Like to say like, but that's just kind of like going between whether or not you think someone opposing it, like, are they supporting this position, which might lead to bigoted outcomes for a bigoted reason, like for a non-bigoted reason? Well, then they're not bigoted, but the position might lead to bigoted outcomes. But is the position itself bigoted? Like, I guess probably not, because it would depend on where it's coming from.
Yeah, so I saw that's sort of like my issue is it feels like in these tweets and a couple of times in conversations you're saying that the position is bigoted, but I don't really see that we would ever apply that with other cases, with other ethnic groups. I think it's only happening because it's Israel. I don't think we would usually use this the way you're using anti-Semitism. We wouldn't use it.
Would be bigoted in like the most micro way. So I would say this if it were the case that, say, Israel did manage to get like 16, 17 million Jews between the river and the sea, and then they said one state solution. Again, they can say it's equal rights and everyone being treated fairly, but in a sense, like, that's to me that would be like an anti-Palestinian measure, like, because it would be. I probably wouldn't say it in that way to someone. I'm just saying it to you just because it's like a frank conversation. But like, I wouldn't say, but that's not the position I've been saying on Twitter or like on my stream or anything. I haven't been out there saying that just because you say this, like, I'm going to call it a bigoted position. It's just the split between whether or not the outcome makes it a bigoted position or not. So
sure.
As far as I'm not doing it just for Israel, I'm saying it would be the same if it was reversed on Palestinians as well.
That might be the case. I guess it's hard to even talk. There's not as much scrutiny on the, ultimately you're out there defending Israel's actions because you're fighting with the lefties who are crazy on the other side. And, so everything you're saying about it, I'm aware that everything you say about this, like, you're always, you're put in a position where you're more likely to say things that are defensive of Israel just because of the type of engagements you're having. So I can't look at something and say, oh, well, here's him saying the exact same thing for people saying things about Palestine. It's kind of difficult for me to get an anchor point there to know if you're like...
it's just like a hypothetical, because obviously we don't live in a world where there's 20 million Jews in Palestine and then they can actually, and the whole region can become one state, yeah. But I don't know. I mean, last video I did was about the fucking offensive plan and how horrible that is. So the Zionists are very angry with me for that. But in any case, as far as what I was actually talking about that you were referring to on Twitter, that wasn't even about one person, one vote being a bigoted position. That was about specifically people saying that if you've even had the slightest sympathy with Israel, you should be treated like a Nazi. That was kind of where I came from.
Yeah, I know that's not where the original conversation came up from. I saw this part of it and I was like, the reasoning wasn't was rubbing me the wrong way.
What reason? Like my one?
Yeah. Just you saying that it was mainly this last tweet. You might have to think about it more, but you probably would be. If the majority of Jews seriously wanted to kill and displace 5 million people, it'd be justified thinking there's something wrong with them, unless you think you can hate most Jews without being a Jew hater. Lol. So like this whole idea of like,
when I say there's something
like, so the example I immediately thought of was like immediately like let's imagine, I don't know what the stats are on this. I'm sure this isn't the fucking case. I'm just like constructing hypothetical. I'm trying not to be a total fucking racist here, but it's gonna sound racist as fuck. Imagine like most Muslims were supportive of FGM. I don't know if that's the case worldwide or what, but imagine most Muslims worldwide support FGM, and you're like, dude, that's a despicable, barbaric practice. FGM is fucking, dude, that's insane. That's fucking disgusting. That's insane. You wouldn't be, I wouldn't call you Islamophobic for having that response and thinking that anyone that practices that is like barbaric and disgusting just because most Muslims believe in it. You know, I wouldn't say, oh, you're an Islamophobe. So the idea that at the end here you're saying, unless you think you can hate most Jews without being a Jew hater, it's like, well, yeah, kind of. If most Jews were like full-blown Nazis for Israel, like actual, like, you know, full-blown Nazis, then yeah, you could kind of have a negative impression of them without being a Jew hater. You could actually be a very liberal, progressive person, and you hate them because they're anti that.
Yeah, but you'd still be like that's again just this, like the semantics of like you hating but you're still hating most Jews, right? Like, so
but that doesn't mean you have a but that doesn't
the way
mean
I say it is when I see fucking all these videos of Israeli settlers doing their fucking shit, and I'm like, oh God, if I actually did watch enough of this stuff, I probably would become anti-Semitic, because it's like, you know, they keep on doing it with like
okay, but here's the thing, it's like
it's like
just hating most of a group doesn't mean you hate the group, right? And I think reducing it like that, I understand you don't really fully commit here, but this is like not how I've ever looked at this stuff. I've never heard other people really look at stuff like this either. It just seems so bizarre to go, oh, if most of a group hold this position, hold this belief, and you hate that belief, you therefore hate this group. It's like, no, you don't hate the group. You can hate the belief and think the people who practice that belief, help put that belief into practice, are despicable. But that doesn't mean you hate the group. That's not the case. It never. I don't think that's ever been the case. That anyone. I've never heard people argue that before. That's crazy.
I don't know. I kind of hate evangelicals.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean you. Does that mean you? But does that? Okay, so you kind of hate evangelicals. Okay, but if someone says they're an evangelical, are you going to treat them poorly? Are you going to? Do you have a negative disposition towards them, or
no,
is
I
it
wouldn't.
just...
But that's why the context of this tweet thread is different, because it's in the context of someone saying that if you've even had the slightest sympathy with Israel, you should be treated like a Nazi. In which case, it's like, whoa. But yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I know. That's why. So yeah, like. Because it's the whole distinction is basically between whether or not you hate them because of that particular identity, like inherently, or whether or not you hate them.
Well, I mean, because it's not even you're not even hating the people. You hate a belief. You hate a belief, and you think people who see, there's a more complex argument with the Israel thing, I think, because the thing is, if you say it's a very stupid, like that the phrasing that person's used, I imagine there's probably some fucking stronger point you could construct here. But that the idea, any sympathy with Israel, well, I'm sure probably fucking most of the Jewish diaspora around the world has had some positive feelings towards Israel at some point. You know, there's a lot of even if you want to take like the most, like, let's fully accept the pro-Palestinian activist account of history and the world and reality. Even with all of that, as a Jew, you would be subject to atrocity propaganda or whatever that makes you feel like Israel is like this safe place. And at some point in your life, some point recently maybe even, you would have felt like someone's gonna be like, oh, I'm glad Israel's there, because if that ever happens to us again around the world, at least that exists. There's probably something like, oh, you've got a family member or whatever. So just from like the interconnectedness of the world and knowing people, knowing family, having connections to different countries, you probably, as a Jew, have had some sympathy towards Israel at some point. So you are basically writing off all Jews with that statement, essentially. So there is like a little bit of an extra, but there's probably a stronger point that you could make there, where it's like, if you've been supportive of Israel's actions since the ground invasion, post October 7th, you should be treated similarly to a Nazi. Now, this one, I could probably construct. There's probably a bit more of an argument here that you're not being anti-Semitic there, because it's like there is an active. It's people, not just Jews, people who have had a positive feeling, expressed positive support towards a specific military action. At that point, it's not some vague feeling of sympathy. It's a specific, there is a position, there is a plan, or, well, kind of a plan. There's a event being laid out in front of you. Do you support it or not? I've got a moral judgment about this event. Okay, I've got a moral judgment of you based on whether you support this event. And I don't see how that, like, if it was rephrased something like that, I wouldn't really see that as anti-Semitic. I would think, probably most people around the world who supported the Israeli military action on October 7th, post October 7th, probably aren't Jewish. It's probably the Jews are probably outweighed by people of other backgrounds, and they would probably still hate them all the same. So I don't see it as an anti-Semitic belief in that case.
If you add in all that qualification and just disconnect the person who said it from all the stuff that they say about Jewish history and everything else and Zionism in general, then yeah, that would probably be different. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but then this one is, it feels like, I feel like you argue, but this is the thing that I feel like you're arguing so often. Your arguments are about you'll argue something based on like the statement, but the real argument is about the person. I feel like this happened last time.
It's about the statement. It's about the wealth of opinion that comes from that person, right?
Yeah, but we can look at a person and we can go, okay, you're saying something that could be benign, but I know you. I know you're a piece of shit, so I know that's not benign. But then,
yeah, like I understand the context in which they're saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it feels like you will defend the judgment of the statement more.
What do you mean? Like I would take the statement more literally, or the way? Yeah, you would defend the judgment of the statement because the person who says it is like saying it from a place that would like back up the opinion that it's coming from a bad place, rather than concerns about the war. Is that what you mean?
No, I'm saying like it feels like you will take a position like, unless you think you can hate most Jews without being a Jew hater, you've staked that position on to defend your read of a statement, but it feels like you never even need to get to that argument, because fundamentally your argument isn't about that statement so much. The statement could be totally benign. It's about the person making it and the fact that that statement has room to be malicious. And I know you're in that room because you're a piece of shit. That's what your real argument is. But you've instead staked this firm position that, oh, well, if you hate most Jews, you must be a Jew hater.
I don't know. Like I feel like in that stage you get to a position where it's like the question is like, would it be okay to hate most of the Jews if they actually all became genocidal? I'm like, yeah, it probably would be, yeah. But fucking...
It wouldn't be okay to be an anti-Semite. But this is more... Yeah, even if most Jews were Jewish.
Yeah, I know, because it's not an inherent quality to like... Yeah, it's not inherent to being Jewish, like, to believe those things.
Yeah. It wouldn't suddenly become it wouldn't suddenly become justified to turn around and be like, oh, no, I hate Jews, and Jews suck. It's because of their religion, it's because of their ethnicity. Yeah, it wouldn't be okay to suddenly turn around and do that just because most Jews are genocidal, right?
Yeah, I think that's why I said at the beginning, I think that's fair. Yeah, like I get that, which is why I would come back to what was actually being said, which was this opinion that like sympathy for Israel or even like just being a Zionist in general should be akin to being a Nazi, which I just don't think is... Sure.
Did this come up in the Ethan Hasan debate? Did Ethan, I feel like, or was it Ethan Sam Cedar? I can't remember. Didn't Ethan argue that if you hate Zionists and most Jews are Zionists and you hate Jews?
I don't know if he said it in that way. I think the dispute was over whether or not like because I don't know, what were they talking about? They were talking about how people like to hold up JVP as if they're representative of any kind of like majority or substantial part of Jewish opinion, which they're not. I think whatever they were saying, Sam Cedar said like it's dangerous for you to conflate Zionism with Judaism. I think that was the whole thing. That was like the essential core of the argument that Sam was So I can't remember what Ethan was saying, but I remember that was what Sam's response was.
Yeah, I felt like
It sounds like that's what you're saying as well,
the
the conflation of Zionism with Judaism.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It feels like it's happening a lot. It feels like Ethan does that. It feels like that's going around right now a lot.
Okay. Why do you think Zionism and Judaism overlap so much? Do you think they overlap a lot, or?
What do you mean? I mean, there's I think there's several reasons why Zionism and Judaism overlap so much. I mean, there's like the like obviously biblical reasoning, and then there's the more recent last century of historical reasoning, and then I don't really know what you're asking me, I guess.
Because the question is like, is there, there's nothing artificial, there's nothing like forced about someone conflating Zionism with Judaism when they say like most Jews would probably cross the threshold for being considered Zionists given their views on Israel. I think that's probably fair if you consider Zionists from like the actual definition, which is like, right?
Yeah, but you should, yeah, but that's not the same as conflating Judaism with Zionism. Saying most Jews are Zionists is not the same as conflating Judaism with Zionism.
Well, that's what I would say as well, because I don't think Ethan, or definitely not me, I don't think all Jews are Zionists. But when I say, so if I put forward a position when I say that like anti-Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic,
I'm pretty sure it doesn't okay.
Popular.
I feel like Ethan he doesn't say all Jews are Zionist. I feel like he pushed 90% as a figure at some point in one of those debates, and
Yeah.
I would have to go back and look. I'm pretty sure there was a point where he said basically that fundamentally the way I came away from an argument he made, I think it's the one where Sam Cedar said it's dangerous to conflate the two. The way I came away from it was basically most Jews are Zionists. And he didn't say these words, obviously. Most Jews are Zionists. Therefore, if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Jew. That's basically how I came away from reading roughly the essence of his argument. So I thought there is a conflate. It feels like to me, I have to go back and look for the exact wording. I forgot that, I didn't think to bring this up with you specifically today. But yeah, it does feel like there is a conflation happening there, and that is the point where it's conflating, where you are making the argument that you taking baseline anti-Zionist positions, believing in one person, one vote or whatever, that is inherently anti-Semitic because most Jews are Zionists, and therefore, if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. That feels like the reasoning we've fallen into in a lot of the discussion right now.
Okay, well, so I don't believe that personally. The way I put it is that Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic, but typically today, the popular anti-Zionist movement and their beliefs and actions, there's a Venn diagram between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, obviously.
Like,
Yeah.
And I think that can come from the left, it can come from the right, and I think it does in both cases. Yeah. And I think it's something that anti-Zionists don't really like to address because they just keep saying, stop conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Like you're the one making Jews unsafe by commenting on the fact that it's like, of course, like Jews and Zionism, because of their entire history, have like, that is going to be connected. There's a reason for that. There's a reason that these two things are like connected quite closely. Yeah. Whereas people will say like Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism, which is kind of mental. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's obviously absurd to say that Zionism has absolutely nothing to do with Jews. That's like, that is totally absurd. I suppose, so the thing I'd say is, I agree that the lefties don't want to address, pro-Pally lefties don't want to address the fact that there is underlying anti-Semitism, or that they fall adjacent to anti-Semitism a lot of the time, because they feel like any looking around or self-scrutiny weakens their case or cause or whatever. So they just allow it to run, to keep going. I agree with that point, but I think that what happens when you have people firmly stating, like the perspective that if you're against Israel or against Israel being an ethno-state, you're in some way anti-Semitic. I think when that position is being argued, I think I suddenly understand the lefty argument more, that people making that argument are creating a dangerous situation for Jews, because I think any time you attempt to link Jews in Western countries so directly to Israel, you are baiting essentially blowback in a way. I think the conflation between, or the linking of Western Jews to Israel so strongly, I think does create a dangerous environment. I think that is people start seeing. I think this is pretty historically proven that when Israel do crazy shit, anti-Semitism in other countries increases. So I think the more you link Jews in other places to Israel, you're worsening that. I think Ethan does that pretty badly.
Interesting. I'm guessing we would say the same with groups that call themselves like Islamic, and then they do like ISIS shit.
Yes,
they're making the world unsafe for Muslims. Okay. Right. I think the one difference is if we get to so one of these polls is like 65% of British Jews describing themselves just as Zionists, like flat out. I guess the question is, if linking Jews to Israel is dangerous for Jews, at what point is it also safe to say that 65% of British Jews are making things themselves unsafe by identifying as Zionists?
Yeah, but that's a personal choice that they make. Ultimately, it's not. They're not making themselves unsafe as Jews. They're making themselves unsafe as Zionists. They are choosing to support the foreign policy of a country that has huge negatives for the people affected by it, potentially huge positives for the people enacting it. You are choosing to advocate for that position, and you are saying, "I advocate for this position, come what criticism may." That's
you have to support Israel's foreign policy to identify as a Zionist. You can be the biggest fucking government hater.
Okay, sure. Well, I suppose I literally whenever I think using Zionism personally for me, I think using Zionism to describe people who believe in just temporary two-state, they need to be safe, etc. The position we discussed before. I think using Zionist for those people is kind of a retarded Zionist definition. To me, Zionism does require some like this land was promised me 4,000 years ago, or I should be able to expand out in this land. There's got to be something else there where you principally believe that land belongs to you in some way.
But why? This wasn't the case when, obviously when Zionists began. It wasn't about the land being promised to them or anything. It wasn't religious.
No, it's not. I'm not saying it has to be religious. I'm humorously presenting the idea of entitlement to the land, belief that they should be the dominant ethnicity there.
Yeah, but that's the problem, though, right? Because
there's a difference.
Zionism is defined that way.
Well, I don't know whose fault is it.
I think it's people who mischaracterize Zionism. No, the fact that Zionism can be a broad church, all the way from the crazy revisionists and settlers back into the labor lefty ones who want a two-state solution. Like the fact all these people are Zionists, like all of them.
Well, I mean, I thought you can do this for like every hot button political word. No, they all get bastardized. Yeah, everyone's a racist. Zionism, everyone's a Nazi. Everyone's a Zionist. Everyone's a I know.
Yeah, but I think Zionism gets bastardized mostly by the people who are like the anti-Zionist types, because they try to make Zionism always like it has to have like the worst implications of
true. I think people on the other side are motivated to expand the definition of Zionism too, because they catch more people and manage to bring them in and support the idea with them. Well, I think there's a motivation.
That's not historical though, right? Because the political Zionists, like the first ones, that even back to the ones who opposed the initial evictions in the 20s, like the most basic, like just buying land and evicting the tenants, even the ones who opposed that, like they were still Zionists. The ones who, Chomsky at one point was a Zionist because what he wanted was like Palestinian workers and Jewish workers to form their own little socialist state in Palestine. Like that was still Zionist. So no, it's not Zionist.
My issue is always been broad. Here's my problem. Sure. Here's my problem is that it's not a Zionist position to like come to a situation where there are people who have, like any situation where there are people who have been born here. You know, this isn't just settlement saying, well, this isn't just people coming from, you know, European countries and going over there and, you know, buying land from rich landowners. It isn't that. People are already there. You've come to the situation, someone born in the last 30 or so years, and there are people there who have been born very recently too. That's all they know. You come to the situation, you think, okay, there are people in this area. We shouldn't displace people. We should come up with the best solution for the people in this area so they can have maximum sovereignty and self-determination and safety. That's not a Zionist. I don't see that you would label that as Zionist. Labeling that as a specific thing seems insane to me, and it feels like it's just trying to get people on board with some specific project, when that's not, I think, most people's outlook. I think that's the general outlook that people should have or do have in, like, at least liberals, when they come to this sort of thing. I think that the general outlook is you come to the best situation for the people that are there right now. Regardless of any history, you try and come up with the best solution for the people that are there right now. And labeling that as Zionist is absurd to me. To me, Zionism has to have some specific principled belief in the state of Israel as a Jewish state, at least, at bare minimum. Principled belief in Israel as a Jewish state. It can't just be, I think right now, these populations can't mix, but I believe, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That you would label that as a specific thing, when that is just like it's the baseline liberal worldview to any conflict where people are being displaced. It's not a specific thing. It's just, we need to come up with the best solution for these people right now.
I don't really know what else to say apart from what I've already said, so I'll just say it one more time, which is just the fact that, like, this is what Zionism was from its inception. It was always a broad church. It was always people arguing about whether or not there should be,
but there's a
like,
difference
more expansion or less expansion.
That's the thing, is that you can say back 100 years ago, that's what Zionism was, but Israel was you know, not fucking founded 100 years ago.
But even now it is, right? Like, even within Israel, like, they're in Israel, the people will fight over whether or not they want to unilaterally just opt out of Gaza and the West Bank and just give it all back, and that's two states, and then we've got ours, they've got theirs. But if they want one vote at some point in the future and it's safe, we'll do that. Those people will call themselves Zionists. Like, that's what 90% of the country calls themselves Zionists, like, even though it's very broad.
But then at this point, you're just saying, yeah, it is bastardized. Yeah, the term is bastardized. I like the bastardized version. No, I think there should be a more specific version.
No, it's not bastardized. That's what the term's always meant. That's what the term's always been. It's always been just
always
that one baseline.
So anyone that thinks that Jews should be in that area at all, even if they think it should be a socialist worker state of Palestinians and Israelis.
No, that one is probably not the case anymore. But it you said the baseline being Jews have a right to exist as that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, even if it's, like, for the foreseeable future, like that. Yeah, that's still a Zionist position. Yeah, because the way I see it is that there are two camps that are really, like, the big kind of issue and the big conflict in the Middle East with Israel is that there's the one side that thinks Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, whether it's inherently or forever or temporarily. And the other side that wants Israel destroyed.
If you believe right now that it's just so ridiculous. If you
believe that's the conflict in the Middle East. If you
believe right, I understand, but that's not the conversation in West countries. If you believe that Israel has a right to exist right now in a way that is safe for its people, okay, but fundamentally you principally believe in anti-Zionism. You believe that Israel, fundamentally, it should not be an ethno state. Jews do not have a right to that land for it to be an ethno state for them into perpetuity. They do not have it right. You would be fundamentally anti-Zionist, even if you don't believe in the immediate destruction of the state of Israel. You would fundamentally be anti-Zionist. So calling that a Zionist position, that you believe that there is a temporary need to not have these populations mix, but fundamentally you're against an ethnic state, to call that a Zionist position is ridiculous to me. We're not in the same position that we were in the fucking 1920s. There aren't Jews moving over there right now to try and set up a state. It's not back then saying, yeah, Israel should exist at all, and calling that Zionist, that makes sense, because it's not fucking founded yet. You're saying it should be founded. That makes sense to me. Calling it now, saying now, there are already people here, they shouldn't be displaced, they shouldn't be killed, they shouldn't have their borders dropped so that everyone from surrounding countries can come in. They saying that now, that's not a specific thing. That's just a baseline liberal outlook to how population should be treated. That's not a specific thing. you could still be anti-Zionist even if you believe that those people shouldn't have their country stripped away from them right now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I'm saying that if you want to hold that position, like you're going to say that, because that's basically my position. My position is that they have that need all the way up until it's no longer an issue in terms of safety. Like once the safety issue is gone, then just open borders, do whatever the fuck you want. But if you take that position, people who are on the anti-Zionist wing are going to call you a Zionist, right? Because
okay, but that doesn't mean I have to call myself a Zionist. That doesn't mean I'm going to go.
You don't have to.
That doesn't mean I'm going to go, oh, yeah, I'm a Zionist, guys. I freaking love Israel. No, I'm going to be like, no, fuck Israel. But also, you guys are fucking insane. But it's like, I don't see the need to suddenly coalesce into a fucking, like a Zionist versus anti-Zionist camp when there's, no, I don't fundamentally agree with either position.
Yeah, you're at both sides. You're welcome to the club.
Okay, but it feels like I worry a little bit. I feel like you've been pushed into the Zionist camp. I feel like you've done the thing that why I left the left, but with anti-Zionism, all the anti-Zionists are fucking insane assholes, and you've been pushed into this camp where you're defending things that I don't think you otherwise would.
Like what?
It feels like I've sort of pulled teeth to get through this Zionism bit, where it's like I feel like it's a pretty common outlook that the people there should have the best situation for them right now, but fundamentally I don't believe in the ethnicity. I thought it's a very common outlook. But when I first pitched this to you, you seem to be saying, oh, no, that's Zionism. You're part of the club. You're Zionist.
So I think in every meaningful sense of practicality, it is Zionist, because like it's only in the sense that this future where the Middle East is so unrecognizably changed so that Jews can live as a minority in one of these countries and actually be safe and be equals. Like that's just not happening anytime soon. So it's just weird that you would convince yourself to like a proper, like an anti-Zionist.
This is like saying it's a capitalist position to think we shouldn't have a communist revolution right now. It's like that doesn't necessarily mean you're a capitalist, does it? Just because you don't think it should be a violent communist revolution right now.
Yeah, like when you get like reformists who are just like, oh yeah, I'm very anti-capitalist, but I just don't see any like form of it happening right now. But then it's like, yeah, then some people who like, if you're capitalist until a better system comes along, then yeah, you kind of are a capitalist, right? Like yeah, you're not married to it, but until the foreseeable future, until something actually comes up, then you might as well be, right? What's the meaningful difference?
Okay, so you would say Ethan is a Zionist?
In the sense, yeah.
So, wait, so when they were all calling him a Zionist, and he was getting mad about that, he was unjustified?
No, the problem is that the word Zionist gets butchered. Like, people shoehorn it into thinking that you support the government and the settlements and the expansion. So, if you're going by, like, the typical, like, Western online definition of Zionism, then, yeah, that's like, they conflate Zionism with, like, Kahanism. That's what they think it means. But
I don't think that's true. I don't think they necessarily think it means the most extreme version every time, but they were calling him a Zionist. It seems like you agree.
Yeah, I mean, if you think Israel has a right to exist now as a Jewish state, and if conditions change, then that right would go away because of like if the safety issue is gone, then you can say that probably would make most people see you as a Zionist because that's the world we live in now. Yeah.
Well, no, not most people see you as you think he is a Zionist.
Yeah.
So what was the problem with him being called one?
Because I don't think Ethan or the people attacking him necessarily agree on what they mean by calling each other Zionists. Like that's the problem. Like that's just why I do it as well. Like,
well, I mean, loads of people online.
You don't.
Loads of people online don't agree on the definition of Zionism. Like there's going to be a million different definitions if you ask a bunch of different people, but or like their perspectives on it, whether they view it as like the most extreme version or if they've got a more varied view on it. There's going to be a huge variance in internet commenters and content creators between exactly where they land on that. They're all spectrums ultimately. So I don't understand really where it feels like the initial grievance there was he's being called a Zionist. He's not a Zionist. He's actually very anti-Israel. He's very pro-Palestine. But no, now we're saying he's not. We're saying he's a Zionist.
Yeah, well, this is where according to the way I understand Zionism, which is just believing that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. It doesn't have to be permanent, doesn't have to be an inherent right. That's how I think it means, because like that's to me what it's always meant. Like, and it's what it's always meant to the people who are closest to it. And it's also in terms of the Middle East, not in Western discourse, because I think it's quite confused. But in the Middle East, that's what the conflict is. The conflict is the ones on one side who think Israel should be allowed to exist, and the other side who think it should fuck off. It should just, that state should not exist. So that's how I see it the most. I think it's the simple answer as well, which I think is the best way. But with Ethan, the problem is that, at least between him and Hasan, I think when Hasan defined Zionism, I think he described it as what, like a religious, ethno-supremacist, exterminationist, expansionist. I was like, yeah, of course you're not going to want to call it all those things, all right?
Well, yeah, I don't think Hasan was calling him a Zionist initially, right? That's not when this started.
No, that was his audience, right? Because obviously, but that definition that Hasan gave of Zionist is like, yeah, of course you don't want to be called that. Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't think you are, even though I'd consider your position that Israel has a right to exist now as a Jewish state, at least until conditions change. I would consider that Zionist, but I think most of the anti-Zionist crowd would, when they think Zionist, they think it has to imply all the other things, because they think a lot of these actions with Israel are inherent to it. They think a lot of the excesses are like Israel is inherently exterminationist. It was always going to do the Nakba, regardless of what the Arab leaders were doing, or it was always going to do the 67 war. Like, it was always going to do these things, regardless of what anyone else was choosing. That's why I think there's the disconnect, maybe. And it goes the other way as well, like, if you support a Palestinian state, lots of far-right Israelis are like, well, you're not a Zionist because you're just going to allow a Hamas stand in the West Bank and then they'll just destroy Israel in the 9-mile wide strip and shit. So, yeah. It's fucking stupid. That's why I don't like it's just arguing over what is and isn't a Zionist in Western circles is a pretty fucking shit show.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Sort of unrelated. Who do you think is worse, Hasan or Nick Fuentes?
Fuentes.
Cool. Good answer.
Yeah.
Hasan or Asmongold?
Probably Asmongold, yeah.
Okay. You're still with us. You're still with us. That's good to hear.
Sounds pretty bad though,
Yeah, look,
Hasan's funny.
Hasan's pretty bad, but unfortunately he's funny, and also everyone else is getting so much worse around him. Like, sure, okay, here's like, this is a totally unrelated conversation. Shifting topic, I try to know what you think about this sort of thing. I used to hate Hasan. I used to absolutely, I totally get why people look at Hasan and seethe. I can't bring myself to do it at this point. Every other, like, the biggest political streamer now is Asmongold. So even on like a reach argument, the idea that, oh, Hasan's got so much more reach than everyone else, so he can have so much more of a negative effect, that's kind of fallen flat, because Asmongold totally rapes him on reach now. And is worse than him in terms of commentary significantly, because like Hasan won't sit there and just cheer on Americans' rights being taken away day in, day out, and Asmongold will. So that's, immediately I'm less sympathetic to Asmongold. There's obviously some streamers have been exposed as being pedophiles or sex pests, borderline, consent violators, some would say. It seems like everyone else, like, who is better than Hasan right now? Who is worse than Hasan right? No, who is better? Yeah, who is better than Hasan right now of his level? Like, who is there?
In streaming or commentary or
in streaming, yeah, in streaming or political, anything that's not. So it has to be not like non-mainstream, alt media of around his size.
In alt media, I mean,
influence media.
Definitely prefer people like Pac. Well, I can say myself, can I? I can say you.
We're not.
I have more faith in you.
Hasan level. Okay, let's take it easy.
Okay, level. Okay, okay.
Around that range, they've got to be in that sort of caliber,
Pac-Man.
Big.
Pac-Man's a million times better. Brian Tyler Cohen. That fucking
see,
yeah, David Pac-Man.
Pac-Man and Brian Tyler Cohen.
Yep.
These guys aren't. I understand they're like better informationally. They can't do what Hasan does. David Pac-Man would never tell someone to kill themselves. Brian Tyler Cohen.
Okay.
Would never.
They're both dropping massively on favorability. Make
a joke about Rick Scott getting killed for Medicaid fraud. Yeah, these guys, they wouldn't do that. I feel like there's something that Hasan captures with younger audiences, or even just like not even younger, with all audiences at this point. side thought here. I feel like the thing people want more than anything right now is people who hit back. You know, they don't like David Pacman's, who will just sit there and, oh, I'm the bigger man. I'm the lib. I wish we could just all be civil and respectful in politics. No, they like Trump, who makes fun of a disabled guy and does like retarded arm movements and laughs about him. You know, like that's what they want. And Hasan can capture. Hasan does that. Asmongold does that. You know, Destiny obviously does that. Hasan can do that. Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pacman, none of these guys can do that. You know, Fuentes does that. Fuentes is probably the best at that. No one else can do. I don't see the other lefty options that aren't total pieces of shit, that have decent viewership, that can actually, you know, operate in the media in the way that an influencer needs to.
So what you're telling me is that you're as a lost left-wing edgy youth like yourself.
I'm gravitating towards Hasan. Yeah,
you're looking for your Joe Rogan.
I need my Hasan. Yeah, my Joe Rogan left. My Hasan's take place.
Listen, it's really funny that you're saying that though, because because from my perspective, in a way, on the one hand, I should be kind of annoyed at Hasan because I think he takes like those left-wing urges and just takes them and puts them through a fucking conveyor belt and turns them into the most useless, retarded, fucking terror simping like shits. Right. So, and at the end of the day, what are they doing? They're not fucking doing activism really.
Oh yeah. So
like,
okay, great point. No, this was another thing as well. This was another thing I was thinking about the other day. I don't understand like what people are even worried about happening with Hasan. Like he he says Houthis are awesome. Okay, Hasan says that. What do you think? Hasan audience members are joining the Houthis? That's not fucking happening. There's no way they can vote to send money to the Houthis right now. They can't just go and like, you know, there isn't some imminent policy coming up where the government's thinking, oh, maybe we'll send a bunch of money to the Houthis and help them out. Maybe we'll set them up as the new government of Yemen. That's not happening right now. So what real life consequence are we really worried about from Hasan's audience? Because I don't see that they do fucking anything.
Yeah, this is why. So, okay, for me, I'm in two worlds. So you can tell me which door to go through. So on the one hand, I sometimes think, yeah, maybe like it's just entertainment for me. Like maybe I shouldn't really care in terms of any kind of consequence because Hasan is actually really good at being a counter-revolutionary. People don't realize this. He pacifies people. He makes people who probably read Marx in fucking first year uni, they get the revolutionary impulses and all that, and then it all just gets satisfied by them watching him on fucking stream, and then you know, Hasan's not an activist. He's never going to be. He only just justifies his fucking hedonism the whole time. So he just takes them and just makes them politically fucking useless and sterile. And all they'll do is just they'll build up some power on social media, and that's it. So that's one thing. On the other hand, I'm like, well, shouldn't I still be annoyed at him then? Because as a left-leaning person, like a social democrat, and Hasan is kind of a social democrat on Tuesdays and Thursdays, depending on which fucking person's in front of him. Then I'm like, I don't really appreciate someone taking the youths and fucking like turning them into like total shitheads, you know? And I think that's like a loss on my end. So yeah, I don't know. I'm in two worlds about it.
So I don't actually think there's really much like what do you think Hasan should be doing other than just like canvassing?
Why does the state
what could or should?
Oh no, with his ideology, he should do exactly what he is still doing.
Okay,
for his ideology, he should be buying sports cars and justifying it. And
okay, well, let's imagine a Hasan who is more in tune with your ideology. What should he be doing?
I mean, with the amount of money he has, it like supporting worker co-ops and startups and things like that would be quite cool because you want to build parallel structures.
I've had Hasan fans say to me before that he does actually put more money into things than people usually present. That he has.
Yeah, he doesn't want his name to be attached to it and things like that.
Labor strikes or some shit like that.
Yeah. Other things might be like again, I don't know how true most of that is, but we'll see. Take your word for it. If we're going to talk about definitely not doing this fucking, oh, I'll vote for Kamala, but I won't tell anyone I'm doing it. I won't tell anyone who to vote for. I think getting Democrats in now, we should probably be quite clear that it would have been better to keep them in than not. And I don't know if Hasan could have changed that by himself. I don't think he could have, but it's not about that.
Here's my thing with the whole voting Kamala thing is it felt like Hasan basically walked his audience right up to the line of saying Kamala, never actually explicitly said vote for Kamala. And so it's like, I mean, I get that it's like an easy dunk to go, oh, well, you know, you say you care about Gaza, but You let Trump get in, so and look what's happening now. Enjoy Trump Tower, enjoy the gold Trump Tower, pro-pally retards. I understand that's like an easy dunk to get on people, but it felt like Hasan basically his stream is him sitting there 8 to 10 hours a day talking about how terrible Republicans are, how much he hates Republicans, sprinkling in a bit of I hate Dems every once in a while, but then it comes to the election, he says vote against Trump. Well, there's only one vote against Trump, and he spent the entire time talking about how bad Republicans are. So he's basically walked them all up to the line of voting Kamala.
Okay, yeah. So if you've ever, so I'm guessing you've interacted in real life with like socialist or like political youth, right? Like you know that's not good enough, right? People don't need to be convinced that it's a good thing to vote for this person over that person. People need to be inspired to vote. People need to be motivated to vote. I know people who followed like fucking full elections, and then I bump into them on election day at like 9 o'clock, and I had to fucking drag them to the bus to get them to vote because they forgot to, right? Like, yeah, people, yeah, that's not good enough. You can't just be like, oh well, yeah, I think the Holocaust horrors is
so you think Hasan isn't enthusiastic enough about electoralism, basically. The idea that a Hasan viewer is never going to get the sense that, well, no, I really should go and do this. This is really important. I go and do this.
Yeah, I think that is important. Yeah.
Got you. Okay. I think I can get that.
But most of it's just like the like ideological problems. Like, yeah.
See, I'm less sympathetic towards that because I like having a range of ideologies, and it's very clear that many people have never even considered Hasan's perspective. Like, surely you must see that. I'm sure you've interrogated like a lot of lefty ideas over the time you've been thinking about politics, talking about politics. But do you ever get the sense that a lot of the people that are piling onto Hasan, saying stuff like terrorist supporter, for instance, they don't really even know what terrorism is. They're just using the US State Department definition, and then they're moralizing that and saying, well, the government says they're terrorists, you say they're good, therefore you're bad. And that's the extent of thought. And I feel like that sort of person could probably actually benefit from listening to Hasan for more than 30 minutes talk about this sort of stuff, because, I mean, you need to have your perspective widened a little bit. You need to have these ideas introduced to you. And that is one way in which I think Hasan is actually a little bit beneficial, is he does make people actually question, you know, the lib line, you know, the line that every lib government is going to feed.
Okay, I was with you until that. You're right about one thing. Audiences are fickle. I think probably most people who call Hasan a terrorist supporter don't really know why they're saying it or whatever. That's probably true with everything. Like, I think people who call me a Zionist fucking baby killer or whatever, like they don't know they don't know what a Zionist is, or like why they think they do about me.
Yep.
Yeah, that's just audiences are fickle. That's all that is. All of them are. As for the terrorism thing, I mean, if you are someone who just believes the State Department on terrorism, and you go to Hasan who tells you something else, you're going to come out more retarded, because the State Department is stupid, right? But they are more of a reasonable gauge, I think, than Hasan, who will just say, well, Nelson Mandela was the terrorist 2008. And then you come out thinking like, okay, what? So like Hamas and Mandela are like morally equal? Like, that's fucking mental.
No, that's assuming that you take everything that Hasan says as law the moment you hear it. But I don't think people just do that, right? I think the point I'm making is that you should be forced by the content. It's good to be forced by content or whatever, by whatever you read or whatever you watch. Obviously, it'd be better if you read the book instead of watching Hasan, but that's not going to happen in most people's cases. It's good to get challenged by a piece of content that brings to you a new idea that you actually have to grapple with. I think people benefit from that a lot. I think Hasan does actually provide that to a lot of people. That there are people who are literally just purely locked into, well, what is a terrorist group? Well, it's a group that the government says is terrorist, and usually they're Muslims. It's like, well, if you have Hasan sit there and explain to you, well, sorry, I'm getting a fucking election,
so who's having a real effect on change.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I think if you get someone like Hasan come in and say, basically, you know, make the argument, hey, isn't your wife kind of a terrorist? And then you see Ethan totally fumble that and you know, try to move on from it and not be able to really contest any meaningful way in the moment. Yeah, that's a good thing for you to see. I think that's good for you to sit there and go, oh, you know, yeah, Hamas is really bad, and I know about all these terrible things that Hamas has done. I've already got a really bad opinion of Hamas, but why is Hasan calling Healer a terrorist? What does terrorism really actually mean? What definitions are you using there? Why is Ethan struggling to contest with this so much? Why is this is like a good thing for people to think through, I think, because terrorist in most people's mind is, and this isn't just the fickleness of audiences, there's lots of content creators think this too, it is purely thought terminating in their mind, where the moment a group is terrorists, that's it. You can blow every single one of them up at any time. They're all terrible people. Everything they've ever done is terrible, and there's no way to ever negotiate with them, even though some of the groups have been like taken off the terrorist register and then put back on and taken off and whatever. You know, they're just like it's pure thought terminating. It's just Hasan supports terrorists, Hasan bad, and that's an insanely bad perspective. That's an insanely uneducated, closed-minded, American perspective to me that is just despicable.
Yeah,
I can't stand it.
Yeah, so I mean, I saw a fucking XQC explaining why he didn't like the terrorism thing, and I heard him explain why it was about attacking civilians on ships and kidnapping them, and why that's like Anne Frank and how that's stupid. Yeah, like I heard XQC articulate that fairly well, and I have no idea what he's saying most of the time. So, like, yeah, I think but I know what you mean. Yeah, if you're saying audiences are fickle, but in terms of what you're saying, it sounds like you're just kind of arguing that it's good to have like a broad ideological ecosystem. Like, it's good to have like a diversity of opinion in social media and shit like that. Like, I agree with that. I don't think Hasan should be banned, but I'm just like, in terms of him like prompting.
Okay. Maybe I've got some preconceptions about your perspective, because I would have thought I would assumed you want Hasan banned. I would have assumed that because that seemed like the train everyone's on. It seems like everyone's on the Hasan should be banned train. Even the people that I usually think are very pro free speech and pro or anti big tech censorship, whatever. Usually, you know, all those people are on the Hasan ban train. So I kind of, in the back of my mind, not actively, but I kind of taken you as fully on that train, but I guess not.
No, when I talk about, I don't know if I can speak for other people on this, but when I talk about the banning thing, it's like, there is something annoying about him just kind of like getting a free pass on Twitch's TOS, but that's not like, that's like the hypocrisy. That's not saying
sure. You don't actually think that principally he should be banned. You think that, I assume obviously you think that the idea of using the material support for terrorism law against him would probably be insane as well. And
yeah, I don't know why he was saying that was being used on Mahmoud Khalil, by the way. It wasn't. It was the Secretary of State's fucking you're at all the foreign policy.
My understanding is the only time that was used for speech before was when there was some NGO giving like direct training on peace negotiations to some terrorist group. It was like
you have to be a very fucking.
It was like training. That was the speech that was being censored. It was the fact they were verbally training these people. It wasn't like, I think this terrorist group is really awesome on a live stream. It was, hey, here's how you do this thing. Hey, terrorist, here's how you do that. That's like, it's very different. You would be creating new precedent to punish someone for that. I think people have just already signed on to it. I've heard Nick DiOrio saying, I'm not a free speech absolutist, by the way, guys, last night, priming people about it. So I'm very blackpilled on the whole Hasan thing right now. It feels like everyone has gone completely insane and just want this guy completely like raped and killed, basically.
Yeah, well, to finish the thing about media ecosystem, well, yeah, but obviously then it's also good that there are people who are also like progressively minded or like social democrat or actually social democrat who can make fun of Hasan whenever he says something retarded, right?
Yeah, like, I agree with that. But
I'm quite happy to fill that role, because who else is going to explain what the
might.
ANC actually did? You know, no one else is doing that.
You might, but I feel like most people who are trying to do that are failing horribly.
Well, yeah, especially because it revolves around Israel-Palestine, and the problem with, and this is why I feel quite bad for like people who are part of the Zionist left, which again I think is a lot of like American Jews and shit like that, is that they don't really have any friends, you know, like apart from the only friends that they can find is like fucking the Daily Mail, and they only identify with like Israel and the Israeli left or whatever because they hate Muslims.
Yeah,
you know, so that's kind of annoying. Yeah, like there isn't really much of a social democrat safe space online right now. Yeah, at least in our area. But the argument I would make with people who just follow the State Department for terrorism and they don't understand what it means, but they'll say it anyway, like uncritically, then I would argue that the response that Hasan has to things like that, or to people like Asmongold, is it's like he's not de-radicalizing people, he's re-radicalizing them, and that's where I think I want to play a bit of a role in stopping everyone from going that way, you know?
Sure. Well, fair. I mean, it sounds like you're way more reasonable than a lot of other people in this. I'm not gonna lie.
Listen, it's hard out there.
It is. It is rough out there.
Have you? So
yeah,
how are you? What's happening with like you and? Have you like kind of like parted ways with Chud Logic over the political leanings, or what's going on there?
No, not at all. No. I got raided by him this stream. We're still
No, not like parted ways of like in terms of rating. I mean, just
Oh.
in terms of like politically, or have you always been kind of where you are now?
I've always been where I'm at. Well, Chud's like pretty lefty, right? He's just he's just anti-trans and a giga immigration guy right now. I'm probably more left than Chud. I am more left than Chud. I've always probably been. We're not more left. More I don't know what I'd call it.
I'm going to enjoy being in charge of.
He was a commie, right? At one point, I've never been like a commie. I'm pretty sock damn, but I'm probably more progressive. That's probably the way to put it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I've significantly parted ways. Really.
I only catch like tiny bits of streams, so I just like every now and then it's like, just referencing.
Well. Yeah, no, I've parted ways with a lot of the commentary audiences and a couple of content creators at least over the Ethan stuff, just because I think that trying to get people banned from platforms really sucks and is usually against my principles, and throwing out defamation lawsuits over YouTube videos that are fundamentally opinion pieces, I think, is really not good. I really hate that. And I think Ethan is being pretty dishonest in some of his argumentation as well with people. Also, the collective responsibility stuff with Snark, not a fan of any of that either. Where every content creator is somehow tied to Snark and holds responsibility for the actions of anonymous users. It's the exact same reasoning that's being used against me by Destiny to justify the idea of shooting me in the head. So I'm not a big fan of that reasoning. Same reasoning that was used by Carefuls to justify going after Kiwi Farms and everyone that was associated to it. So I really hate the massive crusade that's happening right now. I think it's complete cancer, and I'm sickened by the people that are cheerleading it.
Would you say it's primarily on the free speech grounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Fuck. I had a really good question for you, or I think it was good. Fuck. Oh, do you have any opinion on why? So if I had to summarize Ethan's positions right now on, like, say, Israel, it seems like what he wants is, like, he calls the war a genocide. He wants it to stop. He hates Hamas. He hates Hezbollah and all these guys. Seems like he wants a Palestinian state to exist alongside Israel. I think he's okay with Palestinians just like murking all 700,000 of the settlers or kicking them out. Would you say that's like a rough summary of his position on the conflict?
So I would say yes. Here's my issue is it feels like what I see happen with Ethan in conversations and just in the general discourse is he basically will cede those points as like almost was like a get off my back. Like in the Sam Cedar thing, and the Hasan thing actually, there were a lot of points where it's like, yes, genocide, let's move on. And then just like moves past that. And so I think what ends up happening is basically he's ceded all of these like prescriptive claims as like things that he thinks might bring him flack. So he cedes all of those. But then we'll get very emotional and defensive if there's sort of like a characterization of Israel that creates some kind of almost like a fundamental moral wrong. He can't handle those perspectives, I don't think. If someone thinks there's like a fundamental moral wrong in the way Israel has operated, it seems like he gets very defensive on those points. So like one of the examples is I think you're welcome to correct me if you think I'm insane on this, but I fundamentally agree with a lot of people's points about the way Ethan spoken about the Nakba in both the content nuke and in the debate, where it seems like in the content nuke he basically says he says the line, I think it goes, So, people talk about the Nakba all the time, but Jews from surrounding countries, there are actually even more Jews displaced from surrounding countries by Arab states or something like that. And basically what's happening there is he's taking an 800,000 displacement that happened to the Palestinian people specifically, and then saying that each of these individual expulsions and exoduses of Jews from these surrounding countries are not just in some way equivalent in the moral weight, but also equivalent in numbers. Whereas the reality is that the expulsion number that he uses for all those Arab states is over a significantly longer time frame. And there were, while I understand there was the Arab League and everything, there were different reasons, different push and pull factors in each of those countries, that it isn't quite the same as having a one focused individual expulsion of 800,000 people, expulsion campaign of 800,000 people. And so to draw that equivalence in that situation, and then also in the debate to go on to say all of these million Jews or whatever that were expelled from these countries were forced to become Zionists by the Arabs. I think what you're saying there is the moral responsibility for the Nakba does not in any way lie with the Israelis. It actually lies with the Arab League entirely, basically.
Okay. This could either be like a 1 hour conversation or it can just be like 2 minutes. I'm just going to do 2 minutes. I'm just going to go short. Okay. So, man. Okay. So, I think in the line in this video, I think, he said something like, he's talking about Israel and how it's like a country of people who are descended from refugees and all this kind of shit. Either they come from Russia or the Holocaust or pogroms. And then and then with the Jewish exodus from the Middle East, there were more people displaced in that exodus than there were during the Nakba, even though it was over a period of 10 years or 5 years rather than 1 or 2. So one of those arguments you said was legitimate to me is the false equivalency, because in the Nakba, it was, for most people, there's a military coming to your village. They've committed massacres in other places.
Noises and all this shit, trying to drive you out of your home. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a chance they might let you stay. There's also a chance they'll shell you and you've got no defenses. There's also a chance they'll just expel you. There's a chance they'll massacre you, so you're just going to run. Why not? Yeah. And that's not really voluntary. You're clearly running for a good reason. That was most of them. The Jewish displacement, push-pull, you're right. I'm not sure which country it was more pull than push. It was more push than pull, I think, in pretty much all these countries.
Okay, so, I mean, what I'm saying is what are the ones they point to? It's like Morocco, I think, tried to keep the Jewish population right. I think there were some others that someone brought up to me, where there were a few countries that were actually trying to keep their Jewish population, at least initially.
So Iraq barred their Jews from leaving and then extorted them by fining them for trumped up charges.
I know the Iraq one is they try and spin that as though Iraq actually really wanted to keep the Jews, but actually it was like, okay, you're kind of there's a wall being put up and you're being pushed into a meat almost. But
Morocco, I don't know if Morocco tried to get the Jews. I mean, most Jews left Morocco after independence, and then there were anti-Jewish riots in late 40s there. So, it's mostly okay. Unless you want to go into a further debate, I'm just going to tell you it's more push than pull. Okay, and if
I'm sure. I don't doubt that. I'm sure there was a lot of anti-Semitism surrounding the country.
But it's still a false equivalency, because fleeing persecution or a pogrom that happened a few years ago or riots is not the same as fleeing a fucking military. I get that. That's a false equivalency. That's a legitimate criticism.
Yep. What about the idea? Okay, so here's specific point I want to zero in on. I want to get an answer from you on. The idea that you place the moral responsibility for the Nakba on, quote unquote, the fucking Arabs forcing the Jews to become Zionists.
Listen,
what do you think about that?
The fucking Jews did the Nakba and the fucking Arabs got the Jews to leave the Middle East. This is true. It's fucking true. It's not saying all the Arabs. Okay, everyone knows this. That's stupid. Yeah.
But it's not. But it's not just okay. But it's not just a matter of So it's not just using the fucking Arabs or the fucking Jews as a stand-in. It's there are sort of a couple of things happening there where, one, you're saying the Jews were forced to become Zionists by the Arabs, is saying the moral responsibility for the Nakba lies with the Arabs, not the Jews.
Oh no, I think because this is what I don't get. Like the Nakba happened was done by a mostly Ashkenazi Jewish army, and the Palestinians were the Arabs in Palestine. Like those were the Jewish exodus from the Middle East was different Jews getting kicked out by different Arabs. So I don't really know if it's to say that the Arabs caused the Nakba. I don't think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, but
these are different groups.
Okay, I understand. Is it? I think the people, I would understand this idea that this is all sort of like these events are a little bit intertwined, because when Jews are expelled from these countries, they move into Israel that has recently expanded due to the Nakba. They are now populating the area that was once the Palestinians, or was very recently the Palestinians. That's the whole idea, right? Is that my understanding is that the Nakba started with Plan Dalet or whatever, where the Israeli Zionists, whatever, thought that had intel or whatever that they were about to be declared war on, that they were between sort of a rock and a hard place, that they had to expand and start taking more area to survive because they couldn't defend the part they were in or whatever. So the expansion is to avoid the aggression in theory, but then the Jews from these countries move into Israel and now occupy that space. And now at this point, we're in a situation where basically to me, I think this is my vibe, what should have happened really is, okay, so you're going to be attacked by these surrounding countries. You need to take more space. You might be forced to displace people. Now, the moment that's over, the moment you know you're safe, there needs to be some kind of restitution, some reparations. This needs to be now fixed between you and these people. But this now can't be fixed because this other group of people have been pushed away out of their homes, radicalized, and then this new group of people have moved into their homes because of this aggression from surrounding countries. So it's almost created a fucked situation where everyone's between a rock and a hard place, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, unfortunately, this has happened in lots of areas in history, and it's not really good for anyone involved.
Sure, but my problem is that when you then say, so the expulsion of the Palestinian, or the displacement of these Palestinians, and the fact that they can't go back to where they were before or get compensated properly, when you place the entire responsibility for that, not in any way on the Israelis, you say, no, they were forced to become Zionists by the Arabs, and so the responsibility now is on the Arabs for this. When no, there is obviously some shared responsibility where there's aggression and expulsions and all this stuff, but fundamentally, the Israelis displaced the Palestinians. It has to be made better between those groups, and you can't just appeal to this broad idea of Arabs to almost indicate that, well, the Palestinians had some part in it too. While I understand the Arab Nationalist Arab League were standing with the Palestinians, standing in solidarity to some extent, you can't then you can't place responsibility for this other group's actions on the Palestinians either. And I feel like that's basically what happens, is there's this game that's being played where Israel's responsibility is reduced in favor of placing a burden on these two other groups.
Okay, I don't know if Ethan was making that argument when he mentioned the numbers. I think generally when people talk about the Jewish exodus, they're just talking about
that wasn't about the numbers. No, in the debate, he says that the fucking Arabs forced them to become Zionists. I think that sort of phrasing, I understand why someone looks at that sort of phrasing and goes, "Whoa, it seems like you basically think Israel can do no wrong, or have done no wrong in their history."
I just think it's because. No, I think in the context of that argument, Hasan was just like not really. He was trying to think of any excuse for the Jewish flight from the Middle East other than anti-Semitism from the locals and the local leaders. That's what was happening, and he was like, "Yeah, it was it was anti-Semitism from fucking the Arabs." Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying the fucking Christians did Sabra Shatila.
No, it wasn't. He didn't just say anti-Semitism from the fucking Arabs. He said the fucking Arabs forced them. It was the phrase "force them to become Zionists." It's not just the fucking Arabs thing. But the fucking Arabs thing is kind of bad because it's a clumsy generalization that loops in more people than it should. It's not great, but it's not the worst part. The fundamental part that is the problem is saying the Arabs forced them to become Zionists. That is placing the...
Is that not true, though? Is that not true that they were forced to become Zionists by their rulers?
Some Jews were forced to become Zionists, but to say that in the context, to place that in the context of the Nakba and say, the exodus of these Jews into this country, and say the whole thing is them being forced. It's like, well, there's some truth to that. Yes, some of them were forced to leave. Yes, I agree. A lot of them were forced to leave, and there was a lot more push factors and pull factors. I agree with all these points. However, to say they were forced, that places no burden on the Zionist forces, Israel, that were there already, that already kind of wanted to expand a bit, weren't happy with the position they were in because it was hard to defend. And it takes all the responsibility from that group and places it on the Arabs.
Yeah, because the Jews who fled the Middle East and
Plus,
North Africa
there is that whole point with
didn't do the Nakba.
My understanding
but
is
they were blamed for it anyway.
In that talking point as well, he was. Did Ethan not also? I watched a video on this, and this could be totally wrong. My understanding is that with the timeline, that the way Ethan made that argument was also kind of wrong about Iraq with the Avi Shlaim stuff.
Well, I've already had this. I'm gonna. So I just predict what you're about to say, and then
just predict what I'm about to say and give me the debunk or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. So you're about to say that he said that 105,000 Jews had already registered to leave before the bombings happened. He's talking about the 3 bombings that are ascribed to Zionists by Avi Shlaim. There were 2 bombings before that. So they open a 1-year window saying you can leave within this 1-year window. 2 bombings happened within that window. Neither of them, Avi Shlaim says, were committed by Zionists. After the window closed at 105,000 Jews already registered to leave, then the 3 bombings happened, which Avi Shlaim thinks was done by Zionists. We're talking about the 3 bombings that were done by Zionists, allegedly.
Yep. So, okay, so...
They all happened after the window had closed, after the emigration window was shut, and you couldn't register to leave anymore. Which is why you're like, why the fuck would you bomb places to make people register to leave when they can't register to leave? And most of them already have. Yeah.
So okay, so you're saying that it was already 100,000 before the 3 Zionist bombings?
Yes, the alleged, because no one.
Oh, alleged, yeah. The ones that Avi Shlaim says are 3 Zionist bombings, but they've never been proven because So, okay, so what's the claim that those Zionist bombings encouraged Exodus? How do we?
That's just made by partisan fucking retards who misquote Avi Shlaim.
But Avi Shlaim does. So he doesn't argue that it did cause, but they were intended to cause.
It sounds like he's saying that, yeah.
Because my understanding is that Avi Shlaim actually even in the stuff that Ethan was showing, I wasn't convinced of Ethan's point by the stuff Avi Shlaim was saying, because it seemed like what Avi Shlaim is basically saying is my family left, because of anti-Semitism. But he's also saying there are a lot of people who were through and through Zionists who believed in the project and left because they believed in the project and wanted a better life in Israel. Mm-hmm. So whenever he's quoted in that debate, it's always a quote like, my family, my family, my family. That doesn't really prove anything about what his analysis is.
Yeah, but I think, doesn't Avi Shlaim actually literally say, he's talking to Navarro Media when he says, yeah, the majority of people who fled Iraq was because of discrimination from the government, no?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because this was happening way before the bombings.
Yeah, but that's not the only reason. I understand. I agree with the point that Hasan, basically, when he's asked the question about it or whatever, when it comes up, Hasan is only willing to say they wanted to leave or something like that. They wanted to go there. He's only willing to say that because he's obviously trying to downplay the persecution that Jews face in the other countries, because he wants to make the Israeli Zionist project sound like this, totally willing settler colonial project, whatever. That's the way. That's the presentation he wants to give of it. So he's trying to focus on people wanting to leave. But then for Ethan to come back and say, well, no, they were forced to. It's like, well, no, lots of them did want to leave for Israel. There were a lot of people who believed in the Zionist project and wanted to leave for Israel, or maybe didn't even believe in the Zionist project explicitly, but knew, oh, Israel's for the Jews. I'm going to have a better life. There's going to be more opportunities for me. I'm going to go there.
But then the question becomes, what was happening before 48 and throughout, like, say, the 20th century and the 19th century that would have made them feel like that's a preferable option to the place that they've lived in for generations.
I'm not saying that's divorced from any historical context, but that is the case. And so it feels like both sides basically in that argument played a game of, like, Ethan wants to say all the Jews were forced by the Arabs to become Zionists. That's why they had to go and take all that space and fuck so many people up. And then Hasan is saying, no, they just wanted to do it. And both are pretty retarded reductionist.
Yeah, the answer, you could say the answer is in the middle, but it's leaning like a very, very far towards what Ethan's saying. Most of the Jews,
the history of Israel is obviously spurred on by
yeah.
anti-Semitism from all over the world. Obviously,
Yeah.
the history of the creation of Israel is spurred on by crazy amounts of anti-Semitism that is totally legit, and you can understand why you would want an ethno-state when all this shit's happening to you. You can obviously understand it, but that doesn't. I don't think that means that you can then say, well, all these people that were anti-Semitic to the Jews forced them to create their ethno-state where they start wiping.
Well, it's not about creating the state. We're just talking about specifically the Middle Eastern and African Jews, what made them leave. Yeah, and I think in most cases they were forced to by their local leaders and people who were rioting and shit. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think for most of them that seems to be the case.
Yeah, I think that's placing all the responsibility in the Arabs. I don't think that's true.
It's not all the responsibility. There were Zionist propagandists who were handing out fucking pamphlets and saying, "Oh, you'll have a great time in it." Yeah, you've lived in that place for generations, like your whole fucking life, and this brand new state comes along. Sorry, in which country was this not the case? Like there were pogroms in Egypt, Morocco, fucking Libya, like Yemen, Iraq, Syria. Like I feel like obviously the fear and the discrimination is going to be the most motivation.
Again, it's not just about saying they feel fear, so yeah, they're going to have a feeling towards we need a place to go. It's about saying the actions that were taken in pursuit of creating this place and having these people move there were justified because they were forced to do it. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that presentation.
No, but that's a different thing. So no one, obviously the Nakba was not forced, but the Middle Eastern Jew, oh wait, are we correct in that? Are we just making sure that, are you good in the timeline, right? That the Middle Eastern North African Jews, they left after 48, after the war was over. So they were not involved in the Nakba. They didn't go there. They weren't picking up guns and joining the Haganah and forcing people out of their villages, right?
No, I understand.
They went to Israel after this was formed, right?
No, I understand. But my understanding is that all these things are quite closely connected, where basically Plan Dalet is the idea of we need to expand because we think these Arab states are going to declare war on us. So that starts, that's sort of like justified by already the anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, whatever you want to call it, from these surrounding countries. So that's already spurred on by that. So then there's this first part of displacement taken on. But as that's happening, anti-Semitism is ramping up in these other countries. More Jews are leaving, signing up to leave, whatever. And this carries on throughout the next year, couple of years, and then over the next 5 years or so, a bunch of Jews move into Israel. But by that point, they've already displaced the Palestinians. So I understand that. But the whole justification is it's all tied in together. There's this rising anti-Semitism in these countries. They fear being attacked. That's the justification that's being used to start the Nakba, and then anti-Semitism gets worse in the surrounding countries, and then people leave and move into the space they've just claimed, right?
Wait. That sentence you said just before the last one, it sounded like you were saying the Jews who carried out the Nakba, they did it because of anti-Semitism rising around everywhere, or no?
They feared being attacked by the.
Yeah, it was them and the Palestinian Arabs and the surrounding nation. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that those surrounding countries have a negative sentiment towards Israel already because they've just showed up and found a state in their backyard. And then they're all thinking about attacking. They're all talking about attacking, whatever. Plan Dalet starts. Obviously, as they displace more Palestinians, as the Nakba goes on, anti-Semitism in those countries rises. And then by the time it's over, like, everyone's getting expelled and they all move into the space that's just been claimed. So my point is that the justifications are, or the chain of events is all tied in to one another, where you can't really divorce the exodus from those countries from the Nakba. That it's like these are quite closely tied events where they're happening. There's an initial sign of aggression from the Arab League or whatever, and then there's aggression towards the Palestinians from the Israelis in response to that, and then there's rising anti-Semitism in these countries in response to that, and then
Yeah,
everyone
yeah,
moves
yeah.
it. So it's
Oh, okay. So, okay, you're not saying anything I disagree with in there. It sounds like you're disagreeing. Did Ethan not? So did Ethan? Maybe I'm misremembering. Did Ethan not say that the it was that the when the Jews fled the Middle East and North Africa, it was primarily a result of the 48 War? Did he not say that? I felt like he said that. But that's not mutually exclusive. Like if I say that, right? Do you agree with that? Mostly it was all the 48 War. That's when the flight started from the like after that is when the flight started from the Jew. Okay. That's not mutually exclusive with them being forced to leave by anti-Semitism, because obviously you're a North African or Iraqi Jew, whatever. You're being blamed for something that you didn't do because it's someone else from your ethnic group from a different part of the world that you've never been to did it. Yeah, that's anti-Semitism. That's what that is. That's them pushing you out. That's collective blame, right? So these aren't mutually exclusive. Yes, the 48 War inspired the rise of anti-Semitism to go push it like beyond the point to force people to flee en masse, but that's not mutually exclusive with the Jews in Middle East, North Africa running away because of anti-Semitism, primarily because they are in fear of the anti-Semitism that's rising. Why is someone in your chat saying it's a lesser form of anti-Semitism? What the fuck, man? Okay, sorry.
I literally don't know. I don't even know what that's meant to mean.
It's less bad when you're being blamed for what other Jews did. Sorry, fuck. Before I forget, the reason I brought that up in the first place was because, yes, it's a false equivalency. The Nakba was much more, it was militaries. It wasn't rioters and persecution.
Sure.
However, anyone who compares Israel to Nazi Germany or the Houthis to Anne Frank or Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto, they don't have a leg to stand on for false equivalencies. That's fucking insane. There's so much more in common between the Jewish Exodus and the Nakba than there is between fucking Holocaust and like what Israel does. Yeah.
I suppose the only difference I would say is there's a little bit it's a little bit different when you use an example that's outside of the conflict between the two groups as like an emotional like they're not really saying anything when they compare those things other than it's really bad, you know, like Nazi Germany was really bad. That's all they're really saying. When they say that there's no more detailed analysis happening there, I don't think.
I mean, are you sure?
It feels like that basically is it, where it's just trying to invoke the emotional weight of Nazi Germany a lot of the time, where they're just saying.
I mean, if that's what they're doing, then that's fucking horrible as well. That's just like, yeah, like trying to invoke, because we're talking about one state, which ultimately, for all its flaws and for all the crimes that Israel committed, like it is the result of Jews fleeing persecution. That is why Israel exists. For better or worse. When we're talking about and comparing that to the Nazis who literally like conquered fucking half of Europe just because they thought they were better than everyone else and deserved the land and everyone else could fucking die. Yeah, but no, people do compare fucking Gaza to the Warsaw Ghetto, right?
Yeah,
like
I know, yeah.
if you're doing that, but yeah, like bro, the Warsaw Ghetto, like people should just read a couple of paragraphs about what the fuck happened there. Even after all of this, right? Gaza's not even close to what was happening in the Warsaw Ghetto, even now. Like it's just in terms of like percentage of the population dying and shit, like yeah, not even close. But you know.
Yeah, well, to me, it seems like that's usually the point, is they're saying.
Why are all the question marks in your fucking chat, bro? The Warsaw Ghetto was 400,000 people. Within 2.5 years, it was down to less than 35,000. A quarter of a million of them were taken on a train, put to Treblinka, and fucking gassed. And there was no tunnel network spanning the entire Warsaw Ghetto with weapons and rockets and fucking stockpiles built up for 20 years, poised to try and destroy Germany. Like that wasn't happening. Fuck me, I'm retarded. Sorry.
There's no more question marks trying to annoy you now.
I know. I just knew that would happen. I just thought I'd do a social experiment, you know. Sorry, if you think Gaza's like the Warsaw Ghetto, especially before October 7th, my God. Fuck.
Sorry, where were you coming from? When I said that I think they just try and invoke the emotional weight of Nazi Germany when they say stuff like that. They just, it's like
Okay, well then, but then couldn't you just say that, like, by saying, "Oh, but did you know this maybe slightly less known fact about the Jewish exodus in the Middle East?"
Oh, sorry, that's where we came from.
Remember the Nakba thing that you learned about? Yeah,
I remember now. We're talking about false equivalencies. It's slightly different to me when you use something that's slightly when it's outside of the conflict, like a historical example that you see is outside of the conflict to invoke emotional weight, versus when there are a set of groups that are in interaction with each other, and you start drawing equivalencies between the actions they've committed towards each other, right? I think that's slightly different. I think you skew the analysis in a different way there. where you basically say, because no one when they say it's like the Warsaw Ghetto is using that to say actually what the Nazis did was based. No, well maybe some people have, but I don't think many people are actually doing that. Whereas in the situation of a conflict between two specific groups or a set of specific groups, when you draw a force equivalency between two things they've done, that almost seeks to say, well, that they were both doing it, so it's fine.
I didn't read that. I don't know. No, I don't think I agree with that.
That's how I read in the content nuke, at least. That's how it felt pretty strong.
Yeah, but if you're saying that, then it's like no, I think the bit I disagree with is that I feel like you're downplaying the way that people invoke Nazism when they talk about Zionism. Like when I have to hear fucking like Noah Samson or Hasan or whoever else like literally say Zionism is Nazism. Like I don't know how much less fucking like you don't get to use the hyperbole excuse like that. Like especially when you're saying like, oh, how did we defeat the Nazis? Well, they got fucking DP'd from all sides and smashed to pieces like by resistance
but
group.
We know that
like,
Zionism, like, okay, yeah. I mean, that's sort of like, that is, I mean, I feel like that makes total sense with what I'm saying. Like, yeah, they think Israel is really, really bad. Like, Nazi Germany was really, really bad. So you have to do extreme things to stop them. Yeah, that's still in line with what I'm saying. Unless there's like some more detailed analysis you think they're making. That's
no. I think people literally try to make it seem like Israelis having the country that they do is like the Lebensraum, and I hear people saying that like every comparison with like the war in Gaza is like the final solution to the Palestinian question, or the fact that they talk about it like again, comparing Houthis to fucking Anne Frank, it's like that. No, it's intentional. It's very intentional. Or whether it's intentional or not, let's leave that. It's got that impact. It's like trying to it equates, and definitely I think for a lot of Jewish people, maybe not you, but yeah, it's like I feel like that's just being used to try and like get under the skin of Jews. Because again, especially given the fact that like most Holocaust survivors, where did they go after the war? They went to Israel.
Sure, there probably is for a lot of people. Okay, I'll say that there probably is a motivation for a lot of people where I think basically what they're saying is, to Jews almost, they're saying, wow, you think Nazis are so bad? Well, look what you're doing. That there is an element of that, where they're saying like, it's almost an attempt to invoke some feeling or idea of generational trauma to say, you know, what's happened to you guys, you're doing to other people, so you better fucking stop that, you know. Well, that's being
and I think
said.
it's also just it might also just be because like I honestly think, have you ever seen that survey? There was like a fifth of Americans don't know how many Jews died in the Holocaust.
No, I haven't seen that survey.
Honestly, I think maybe I think sometimes, I don't know if it's people are just driven by like they've seen more footage of Gaza than they've seen of the Holocaust, and because it moves them more emotionally, they think it's okay to equate them, or it's because they just don't fucking know what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto that they think it's an appropriate comparison. I don't know what it is, but it's more than just saying, oh, the Nazis are the bad ones, and everyone knows Nazis are bad, so I'll use them to call these other people bad. I don't think it's that. I see a lot. I've seen like second thought comparing, saying like the Nakba stands up there with the Holocaust. I can find that clip if you want. Fucking bad up and out. He does it all the time with like comparing very specific like Nazi comparisons to Israel. I think Hasan does it quite a lot. Noah Samson does it quite habitually. Yeah, I think it's worse than just, you don't get to just use the excuse like, oh, well, everyone knows Nazis are bad, so I'll just use that. Yeah, so.
Sure. So what do you think's happening then when they compare those events? What do you think they're saying? They're saying that they are the exact same thing, or do you think they're saying they're really bad and being done on ethnic grounds? Therefore, it's like Nazis.
No, I think I think most people, like you said, audiences are fickle. Most people are fickle. They just don't
content creators or people pushing talking points more so than.
Yeah, they're fickle too at this rate. Okay. Yeah, I think I don't know. I just think they genuinely don't know that much about either of these conflicts, like the Holocaust or about Israel-Palestine. Yeah. I just don't think they think that much about it.
Sure, yeah. I felt that is sort of the point I'm making though, is that it's not a detailed analysis. It is sort of just like, it's on ethnic grounds, it's really bad, therefore it's Nazis.
Okay.
Which is like, I think that is a different thing to comparing two actions between two groups. I felt that isn't the same type of equivalency you're drawing there. I agree it's stupid, but it's it's not like excusing an action in a conflict. Sometimes they can use it in service of that, but when you just say these two groups, when you're essentially making the point these two groups have both done this to each other, it feels like you're excusing that action in that conflict versus the false equivalency with the Nazis, where it's more just it's a retarded emotional comparison that's ahistorical and stupid.
Yeah, but in terms of its like outcome, like I don't know what you're doing if you're either just like hyperbolizing what's happening in Gaza versus or Palestine in general versus comparing
a lot of the time what they're trying to do
the
is,
Holocaust. Yeah.
Well, that is a lot of the time what they're trying to do. They're trying to say, guys, you should care about this. This is really bad. It's like the Nazis, they're killing people on ethnic grounds. It's like that. It's like that, guys. It's like the Nazis. That is what they're doing. They're saying you should really care about this.
That's
Why
good,
you care about
but
this?
just yeah, that's great. But just don't be surprised when people think you're fucking mental and don't listen to you.
Sure, I don't blame you for thinking they're fucking mental and not listening to them. But the point I'm making is that it's not equivalent to what Ethan was doing. I think what Ethan was doing was a much more specific excusing of an action.
No, I don't think it's an excusing. I think you can maybe argue that he might have thought that the Nakba and the Jewish Exodus happened like by similar means. Like he might have thought that, and that's wrong. That would be a downplaying of the Nakba and a false equivalency. I think it's more likely that he was just like, well, assuming you're a left-wing audience, everyone knows about the Nakba if you're left-wing. Did you know about like even like a higher number of Jews got displaced in the Middle East? That's quite crazy, isn't it? At the same time, because of anti-Semitism primarily. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think you can. To me, that's like I would take issue with the false equivalency and the implied thing there. But other than that, it's like that's as far as I would go. I don't think it sounds like he's excusing the Nakba or like anything like that.
All right, fair. Well, okay. Do you think it feels to me? Okay, here's just retarded. This is just like drama double stands question, and we'll wrap up here. I've not got else unless you've got anything to talk about. But do you not feel like if, say, Hasan had made a statement like that one Ethan made in the content nuke, that's the sort of thing we'd probably be clipping and post on Twitter and going crazy about, right?
What would be an equivalent statement?
What would be an equivalent statement?
Oh, here's one. But no one actually picks up on this, even though I think it's kind of... You know when people say more journalists have been killed in Gaza than in World War II?
I haven't heard that one before, but sure.
Okay, people say that. And it's like... I don't even know
how many fucking journalists were there in World War II. What was journalism like in World War II?
Well, yeah, journalists had a front line.
Now, you know, there's a whole lot of reasons I can...
Yeah, but obviously it's like or like more bombs dropped than like Hiroshima or Nagasaki or like the firebombing of Dresden, shit like that. Even though it's like, again, okay, like why did the Israeli bombs kill so many less people than those other ones? So it's like, yeah, I don't know, but I think when people try, to me that's like the same thing. It's like they're trying to invoke these catastrophes in history that were so much more large in terms of like suffering and even intention, actually. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, makes sense. Also, I gonna recommend you a piece of content. Okay, if you ever get bored, Nux Taku and Achito had a debate about Israel Palestine the other day.
Okay.
Where do you know about the guy Hasan Shabbat?
No.
He's some guy that Israel said he was like an Al Jazeera contributor and a few other places, and Israel said he was a terrorist, and he said, "I'm not a terrorist. You're just creating a pretext to kill me." And then they killed him like the next week in a targeted drone strike.
Oh, they released that list of 6 people who they said were Al Jazeera militants.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Nux joined this stream and was firmly asserting that Hasan was lying about that guy being a journalist. And then showed a clip where Hasan says he's a journalist who was baselessly accused of being a terrorist by the IDF, and then says that Nux insists that's a lie, and that Hasan's running defense for his terrorist friend, and then tries to prove it with Twitter posts. It's very funny.
Oh wait, so Nux is saying that the guy wasn't even a journalist at all.
Yeah, he was basically saying that he walks it back and says he was a journalist eventually, but yeah, basically saying he was provably a terrorist and wasn't a journalist. And Hasan's lying by calling him a terrorist, by calling him a journalist.
Okay.
So.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome stuff. So I recommend that heavily. Anyway.
Well, I love Nux Taku.
Yeah.
My favorite. Blue fuck. Okay.
All right. Catch you later.
Bye bye.
Yep.